Charlotte Mortlock, welcome into the weeds.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jez.
Real pleasure. Very timely to have you on. Everyone in politics is talking about you for very good reasons. You're very active, a bit of a provocateur, an activist in the Liberal Party, and we'll get to that. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did your passion for communication, journalism and politics come from? Because reading your bio, you sort of cracked out of the egg. Very interested in the world and journalism.
Yeah, so basically just grew up really with a kind of love of storytelling. My dad's a great storyteller, and so was my grandpa, and went into kind of high school unusually determined to be a news reporter. You know, most people don't really know what they want to do. In year 6 was like, I'm going to be a news reporter. So in year 10, I did work experience at Channel 7. And then
were you practicing with the hairbrush, the whole thing?
Yeah, there are videos of me like on holidays with my family being a news reporter, which I had a big lisp. Some people say I still have a lisp, so, you know, hanging around. But then basically went to university, studied journalism while working at Channel 7, and then moved to New York for a little bit, where I worked for the Discovery Channel, and lived in Brooklyn, was there for about a year, then went to Tamworth and started my news reporting career out there.
Right, Prime 7 out.
Prime 7, yeah.
I know it very well.
Do you?
Yeah,
great.
I spent a lot of time doing, I was a counsellor out in Orange, and Prime 7, great network, really covering regional Australia. What were some of the interesting stories you did out there?
I mean, I wasn't really into politics at that point, so I really liked the community stuff. So I used to really pride myself on being kind of second segment Mortlock, as in like not really in the first leading news story, but more in the community stuff. I actually think looking back on it, I was almost like I used to be a bit superior to politics, a bit like, oh, they're all idiots, blah, blah, blah. And I actually just think I was probably overwhelmed by politics and I didn't understand it. And so I pretended that I was too good for it. But I just covered amazing stories around there. I really got an appreciation for weather and for, you know, the impacts that has on farmers. And I would say that was probably the number one thing that I loved covering, just getting to understand, you know, all the different crops out there. And I love the country. I'd still live in the country if I could, but unfortunately my husband wants to be a city slicker. So yeah, but I just had a huge appreciation for it. And after a year and a half in Tamworth, I moved to Sky News as a weather presenter. So it was actually awesome because I had all of this weather background, seeing it firsthand in a really pragmatic sense. And then I went to being a weather presenter.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it like nothing rates as high as like a weather disaster now. Whenever there's a weather event now, you just see every journo, all these outside people at the eye of the hurricane. And now you even get the politicians, you know, standing on the beach, you know, at the front line. It's almost like combat, isn't it? Like you have to get as close to the action as possible.
Yeah.
Did you ever find yourself in the eye of a tornado or anything like that?
Well, with Sky, so I was a weather presenter with Sky for about a year and then I switched into news reporting. But the weather presenting background actually was super helpful because we then went into one of the worst droughts we've had in history and I did a lot of news reporting on that. But I also did cover a cyclone up in Townsville. I forget the name of it now, which is bad of me, but I feel like we're just having a lot of cyclones, so it's hard to keep up with them. But yeah, I also just love that community aspect of whenever you see natural disasters, the silver lining is seeing communities really rallying together to help each other. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, it is very powerful and really important stuff too because that sort of journalism, you know, not just covering the current events, it's keeping people safe.
Yes.
You know, you're actually an information service. So especially out in regional areas where you don't have a lot of places to go to, communications aren't as good. And so it's really important.
Yeah. And I covered the Black Summer bushfires, which was just diabolical. Like, I had some really scary experiences covering those fires, and I never felt more like it was a public service as opposed to just, reporting the news, or, every news person can feel like if you're sensationalizing a story or something, but not on those days. On those days, you are really telling people where they need to go or what they need to do and how they can get help.
Yeah, what not to do. Like, I lived in the North Coast during some of the floods, and, you'd be listening to the ABC radio and they're saying, don't go down this road because there's no bridge.
Yeah.
These types of things, and really making a difference. And so that's, really like a really poignant first-hand experience. So you've made the transition, though, from journalism. It's a really interesting point you made about a lot of people disregarding politics because they don't understand it. Yet if you actually dig deeper, people people want to know, but we don't discuss it really much in society, do we? We're not taught civics. There's not a place where you can really look at the mechanics of both our democracy and political parties. And it's the political parties that are a real mystery, even to people in politics.
Yeah.
And so tell us why you're so interested in democracy and the mechanics of political parties.
Yeah, so I always explain that kind of mystery around politics, or like the lack of interest. Kind of, if someone says to me the Bulldogs are playing the Broncos, if I have no understanding of NRL, that means nothing to me. I've got no context. And it's kind of like politics. Unless you have the context, it doesn't become interesting. And when you learn about it, if you know who's the coach of the football team, or who's out and who's injured and what's happening on the leaderboard, then it becomes really interesting. So when I moved over from weather at Sky to being a news reporter, it still is very politically heavy as a news channel. And then I just became really intrigued by it. I've always been really passionate. I'm a very proud Australian. Like, I really want Australia to be the best country it can be. And I think democracy plays a huge role in that. And I've always probably felt like we're not really entitled to a democracy that works perfectly just by being born in Australia. I really think that every Australian needs to participate in democracy, or take it seriously at least. And we owe it to, countries and people that don't have functioning democracies. And so I think, that really sparked my interest, obviously kind of being surrounded by Sky and weather, and then really went straight into it. And probably became intrigued by some of its flaws, because some of the flaws in politics to me seem so simple. I'm like, hold on, why is this so hard to fix? Like, it seems like a really simple solution. And so
what were some of those flaws?
Well, obviously what I've gone on to do with Hilmer's network is what I couldn't understand is why the Liberal Party couldn't increase its female representation, and why it was very rapidly losing female voters. I was really intrigued by that, because I grew up in a Liberal voting family, but there was just this disconnect, and I was just really curious about why that was. And as you said, political parties are so mysterious. And I just kind of made it my mission to really insert myself into it and learn as much as I could about it and understand what those problems were.
We'll get into Hilmer's network, which is a really fascinating project, but it has always seemed to me that political parties don't want the veil drawn back. They don't want to show the people, as the famous maxim, never show the people the making of laws or sausages, because they lose confidence in all. But political parties as well, because behind the scenes it can be messy and it's not necessarily fair, and sometimes there's processes that people don't understand. So like almost all political parties keep a lot of their internal machinations behind closed doors, how they pre-select, who's in charge of the party, these types of things. So it can be quite confronting for a political party to have someone involved in it saying, let's be more transparent.
Yes, and this is probably like a real point of contention between what I do, which is speak about things very openly, and I think, sunlight is best disinfectant, and a lot of other people want to keep this behind closed doors. And I do get, when people say the Liberal Party is talking about itself again, like, I do actually get that as a valid critique, but it's also, well, if we aren't fixing ourselves on our own accord, then what other option do we have? Like, I really think that people turn to the media and turn to advocacy when they don't feel like an institution is taking things seriously. And basically I think there's a lot of competitive people in politics, and it's not in their interest to have huge swathes of people, coming and being part of it, because it potentially is going to decrease their chances of going into politics themselves. So that's the reality, and people are very territorial.
It's a fascinating tension there, isn't it? The participatory democracy it's supposed to be a really good thing, and yet for a political party, it can, especially the hegemony of it, can be a very confronting and erode their power base, because you get a stack, or what's considered a stack of the party. Your power is dissolved because there's a new wave of young people coming in. And so often you see this resistance. I was in the Greens for too long, I've got to say, way too long. But they're a political party that prides themselves in sort of transparency of government and accountability and all the rest, and yet they don't open up any of their internal party processes for public scrutiny. They don't talk about their party room votes. They don't open up their national conference. They're very opaque.
Yes. And that's all political parties. This isn't just the Liberal Party, obviously. It's, a lot of people have taken politics so seriously. They really started going into politics in high school and straight after in uni. And, we always say, you hear people saying, we want more people to join, the Liberal Party, Labor Party, Greens, whatever. But do you really, people want only people who agree with them on everything politically to join. They don't want differentiation. They only want people who will support them, not their competition in a pre-selection. And so, it does increase competition. And, Liberal values is about being competitive. And I want to open up. I want as many people applying for pre-selections as possible so we can get the best candidate, so we can have the best democracy.
And if you want to compete, you want to make sure you've got a level playing field, and you want to know what the rules are.
Yes.
This is how the process works. And so when people see that, they go, oh, okay. Like I remember when I went in my first pre-selection, I went, oh, you can just nominate and everyone gets a chance to vote for you.
Yes.
And everyone was like, well, hold on. And I had all these people who encouraged me to hand out how to vote and support other people. But when I started saying, well, I can have a go, they were like, oh, well, hold on. This is a different story.
Yeah.
And so you all
That's
of
exactly what it's like.
You all of a sudden you see that. We love you to being a useful idiot to us, but not actually being ambitious, competitive, and talking about, fairness in the process.
Yeah, and that's kind of a lot to do with the factions as well of, yes, we want everyone to apply, but also this person has paid their dues. This person has voted with the factions a number of times. So it's their turn. It's owed to them. And I'm like, but aren't we a party of competition? Don't we want the most competent, capable person who is most likely to help us win an election? And it doesn't really work that way.
And
sometimes.
You see nepotism. Oh, this person is the son-in-law of such and such, or this person, has done fundraising, which is a legitimate thing. This person's a big fundraiser, but this person, they're a fundraiser from, dad or whoever went to the right school, that sort of thing. Where are you aligned in the factions? Like, are you a moderate? Are you where are you?
I'm not aligned.
You're not aligned.
But people will tell you that I am. I think when I started Hilma's, because it was speaking about women and gender parity, a lot of people thought that I'd be a hack for the moderates. And then I started critiquing the moderates pretty heavily. And then everyone said I've gone to the right. And I am genuinely factionless. Ideologically, there are certain things that I'm quite moderate on, but there are also things that I'm quite conservative on. So
tell us about those. What are the more conservative views you hold?
I'm quite conservative on immigration. I'm also quite, this one's not necessarily, well, I guess it is. It's very much liberal values of small government. I don't like victimhood. I really like speaking before about communities in, natural disasters and things. I really want to kind of, in an ideal world, encourage and empower kind of individuals and communities to solve problems, not government. However, I do think we are at a really hectic point in civilization where inequality is so intense. And, we just spoke before we started about social media. There are lots of examples at the moment where we haven't regulated enough. And we have had, the tech bros who've just completely gone through unregulated and, in my opinion, done irreparable damage, particularly to children. So there's definitely nuance
and to democracy too.
To democracy, 100%. That's probably my number one things that keeps me up, because they're all kind of, a lot of my interests are linked in that.
So that's where you think there should be.
Fourth estate, it erodes democracy. Like, from my journalism background, I find I can't stand it.
Yeah, truth, democracy, and children. Yeah, if those things are being eroded, then we've got some problems. So that's an area where you think we should have more oversight, regulation.
Yeah.
I chaired a parliamentary inquiry into AI, and what was alarming about that is that the genie is 100% out of the bottle.
Yeah.
These corporations are the only corporations with the money to actually do this work, to just go, look, we're putting 5 billion, 10 billion into AI, and they've stolen the march on entire states like China or India or Britain or
it's like we're being governed by corporates as opposed to governed by government who actually have people's best interests at heart. Like, I get that it is in the best interests of Meta to keep people addicted to their phones for as long as possible. That's what's going to draw a profit for them. I totally get that. But that is where it's the government's role to say, hold on, there is actually a few things more important than your bottom line, and that is children, that is democracy, that is, journalism, all of those things.
So do you support the ban on social media for kids?
Oh, yeah. I would go further. Like, I would honestly ban iPhones for anyone under 16. Like, I would be a real psychopath if I was to ever go into Parliament on that. I have pushed very vocally for the banning of algorithms, not even for children. I think even for adults, we just need to have organic feeds for social media. I don't think that we should be put down these rabbit holes. I think it is incredibly dangerous, particularly we saw that during COVID. And it's really interesting because some people are like, no, like that's censorship. It's like, no, it's actually not. It is freedom of speech because the algorithm is censorship. The algorithm is censoring what you're saying. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Like, I don't know what happened to my Facebook or Instagram feed, but I'll see two people I know, and then very quickly I'm seeing someone riding their motorcycle into a truck.
Yeah.
And like, I remember as a kid when the internet first, emerged, people would say, you can see videos of this and that and the other. And you'd go, oh my God, I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
And then you don't get a choice.
Yeah.
It's deciding that you're going to see a natural disaster or someone having a paragliding accident.
Yeah.
And you go, this is horrendous. This is snuff. This is watching someone die or have a really bad time. And I'm just going, like, maybe it's just me. Maybe there's something if the algorithms decided something about
really
me.
morbid.
But I feel bad about it.
Yeah.
I go, I didn't want to see that. I don't want to look at my reels on Instagram because you just don't know what you're going to see.
No, it's so
and then
confronting.
I think, well, what if you're 9 years old?
Yes.
And I see in my kids the anxiety that it creates in them. They come in and say, hey, I've seen this thing.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my God.
Tim Minchin also speaks about this quite a bit. Like, sure, ignorance isn't bliss. We all have a responsibility in the world to like know what's going on and to be alive to certain issues. But it's also like, were our brains designed to deal with this amount of trauma, like being inundated with knowing about so many atrocities across the world that we really can't help a lot of them? Like, it's obviously important that we know about things that we can all work towards to improve, but it just feels often like we're really inundated with a lot of confronting stuff.
So you think the solution there is more regulation, more control, this sort of thing? I've been pushing for a parliamentary oversight of AI. In New South Wales, we've got joint standing committees, powerful parliamentary committees that look at things like road safety and infrastructure, these types of things, but nothing in terms of tech. And it's like there's this massive wave of technology that's already having this influence on us, and we just seem we at the moment are powerless in a way, and the politicians seem afraid to take it on because otherwise they just get
Yeah.
deleted by or cancelled by the algorithm.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because people say, oh, well, you can't pick and choose. We can pick and choose. You are the government. You say, hey, that part of AI is really helping us, like medical stuff towards AI. It's finding, cures for things. Awesome. Go for gold. Other stuff that needs regulation. Like we can pick and choose. That is what governments are designed to do. And I just think that needs to be exercised, a lot more. I mean, just before you just kind of another thing that I'm quite conservative on is gambling. I'll get rid of gambling very quickly.
Ban it, all of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ban all of it, but certainly needs a lot more regulation. And I don't think that happens because it contributes so much to state finances.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, especially in the drug law reform space. The alcohol, tobacco and gambling are a great model of what not to do. To regulate it, but don't make your state dependent on it. Like even the Greens put forward a proposition on, like, let's legalise cannabis so we can generate all these taxes and then fund all these things. And I'm like, no, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to make the state dependent on create that conflict where you're all of a sudden you're weighing up your revenue versus public health policy.
Yes.
Gambling is something I think's certainly needs tighter regulation. And would you support like a ban on online gambling? I'm sure that's at least the advertising for online gambling, because it's just everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. And even like I'm going through a lot of things that are bad. But even like Shein and Temu, like those online shoppings that contribute so much to landfill, they're pretty much like gambling. Like little kids go on there and they're like super addictive. It's just all of this stuff that's just gone really rogue. But yeah, I mean, I think Dominic Perrottet was quite bold in what he was trying to take in the last state election on gambling. And I was disappointed that, Mins didn't take that on.
It's just died, and it's just their trials just completely died, not taken up, and it's just faded out of, the I think by design, out of the public consciousness.
And Monica Tudor Hope I am friends with, who's new Liberal, who's just gone into the lower house for state, and also James Wallace. And I was very pleased to see that not only did they both mention gambling, but so did Jackie Scrooby, the independent who got up for Pittwater, in all their maiden speeches. So hopefully it will come back on the radar, because I don't think that we really got very far on that.
No, we certainly didn't. And it's an area where there's just an enormous harm. Like the people don't understand just how terrible it is, in particular in New South Wales.
Yeah.
We're the world's capital for pokie machines. Some of our local government areas are losing billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And there's this culture that's being perpetuated of just, hitting the slaps.
Yeah.
And that's part of, what you do, and blow your check, and it's wrecking lives. You spoke about immigration.
Yeah.
What's your view on immigration? It's an area that I'm particularly interested in, population, immigration, these types of things. I've been sort of raising the issue in Parliament in terms of birth rate.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of, like, it's a symptom of, I think, of a collapsing society.
Yeah.
The collapse in the social contract if we're not having kids.
Yeah.
If we're not having, whoever's here now is not having the kids that we need, that's bad.
Yeah.
If you don't have the time and money and housing for kids, and then you're just sort of addicted to importing people from wherever.
Yes.
It could India, China, the UK, South Africa, wherever and they're our main point sources of immigration. What do you think the fix is?
Yeah, so my views on immigration are quite complicated. It's so I worked in federal parliament for a little bit, and I did some work on the Pacific and the Palm scheme, which is where a lot of Pacific workers come work on farms and send money back to Pacific countries. I think it's a really great scheme, but a big concern with that is that it creates a brain drain in countries where, like, their best and brightest go to Australia. I think that we're going to end up, because so many Western countries that are wealthy are having this population decline, we're going to end up kind of in this race and competition with other Western countries trying to poach the brightest brains from poor countries.
You're the first person I've heard say that. I
really?
completely agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
that we're going to flip to this.
Yeah.
We are. We have already flipped. What we're seeing in the United States, in Western Europe, and in Australia is we are going. We need to steal all the
Yeah.
25-year-old engineering graduates out of India,
Yeah.
out of Thailand, out of these places to prop out our
Yeah.
economy, and a place like Japan, which has got this sort of let's call it like they've got this institutionalized racism.
Yes.
They don't take immigrants there. They're just because they can't solve the problem with immigrants. They're just collapsing. Their
Yes.
economy is actually in collapse, essentially. Like it hasn't collapsed, but you can.
They're not doing well.
They're not doing well.
And it's like when we talk about immigration, like, and this is Liberal or Labor, we say, oh, but don't worry, we're only taking skilled ones. Like we're only like that's a good thing, and that is a good thing for Australia. So I understand that, but it's also like just this sense of entitlement that we have as Western countries. How are those poor countries ever going to stand on their own 2 feet if we keep going in and rating them for their best talent and bringing them here? And the thing that I am acutely focused on, probably really since Trump got in November, is inequality. I just think that so many issues that we are having at the moment come down to inequality, and we've got to kind of put ideology aside, like Labor, Liberal, Greens, Cannabis Party, whatever, to actually fix that, because I think that until we can fix that, we're just going to be the rich countries will be, scrambling to fight over these poor countries that will never stand on their own 2 feet. And I just think I feel really funny about it, just that it's like this sense of entitlement that Western countries have to those skilled workers. But I mean,
but it's almost a form of colonialism, isn't it?
It is.
It's just,
and I don't know why
we've stolen
no one talks about it like that. It feels like colonial. It feels very.
We stole the march on you because, we conquered the world, we colonized, we got the big uplift in the Industrial Revolution before you. We're in front, and now we're going to plunder you. And essentially, young people. Just being young in the future is just a massive premium on it. Young and skilled people are literally fighting for them.
Yeah, and I also do think that this part's not very liberal of me, but I do think that we really need to find a way to increase the minimum wage to people like nurses, teachers, those sorts of groups really significantly, because that inequality is becoming so much more severe. And I do have concerns that if we just keep bringing in migrants to bolster our working class, that we won't get the pay rises because they will work for less amounts of money.
About inequality, Charlotte, are you housing a big issue? Are you a YIMBY or a NIMBY?
I am reluctantly a YIMBY, and I say that because I think that we have lost time to pick more appropriate places for housing because we're just kind of massively scrambling now. I think that if we had fast rail in Australia, it would fix a lot of these issues because we could have more satellite cities.
Yes.
And we could have places like, Tamworth, places like Wagga, places like Wollongong.
Orange and Dubbo, those places.
So those should have been
the Blue
built
Mountains Tunnel. I'm big on the Blue Mountains Tunnel. It's only 50 k's from Penrith to Lithgow, and there's boundless plains. There's a lot of space out there. And cheap land.
There was something I saw on Instagram the other day that had continents with their light seen from space. Yeah. And Australia, just in comparison to every other continent, there's nothing in Australia. Like, it's so bare. And it is frustrating that we're looking at places, that are quite built up already, and we're knocking down homes to build high rises. It just should have never got to that. No. We should have had more satellite cities so people could commute a couple of days a week. I've been to Tokyo. I have used the bullet train. It is fantastic. I don't think that we have time on our side now to build that, though I'm still very supportive of it. I absolutely think it should happen. It's just probably poor planning, It
is.
We've
horrendous.
got so much space.
Did you know we've only just, it's taken us, I think they started the Newcastle Freeway in 1947 and we've only just finished it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually go all the way into Newcastle.
Yeah.
So it's taken us 80 years to get to Newcastle with a 4-lane highway. So it's pathetic. If you look at the United States, I think it's like our two biggest cities, Melbourne and Sydney, would rate in their top 10 for biggest cities.
Right. Okay.
And like most of the United States,
yes,
is cities of like a million.
100%.
Like you think of like San Francisco is small.
Yeah.
A lot of these cities you hear,
which is a lot more sustainable. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot more manageable. And do you know Ezra Klein? Like, do you listen to Ezra Klein? Has recently written this book called Abundance.
Yeah, I've been talking about it.
Have you?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So yeah, I mean, him talking about that rail line that was supposed to be built in California that never got built. I really do think, and this is where I flip back to being very liberal, the bureaucracy and the huge government that we have that isn't working efficiently. And I actually think this was a bit of a shame that in the federal election, Peter Dutton, when he started talking about Doge and appointed Jacinta Price to that role, everyone just started comparing him to Dutton and that role being very Trumpian. And sure, there was other stuff in the campaign that I think people probably made a fair connection there. But if you're a world leader at the moment and you're not talking about efficiency, that's an issue. Like, we need to be talking about why these things are taking so long to get built.
Yeah.
When we've got so many people employed in these, it's like there's too much box ticking. Like there is too much red tape. It's taking too long, and it then ends up being worse because now we are in this crisis where we're going to probably have to put a bunch of housing in places where it really won't fit. And it's going to be poorly designed because we didn't have the foresight and things took too long and there was too much bureaucracy.
Yeah, we've got 3 levels of government and this just torturous approvals process for, major developments and any project. Like, we're in a panic now to build renewable energy. We're in a panic to build new housing. The infrastructure, like in a lot of it, isn't there. Like if you go out to Western Sydney, I went out there about a month ago and there's these huge like suburbs with more people than in Tasmania, some of them, like Riverston. And they've got like goat track, like roads, no buses. The schools, they haven't built the schools. It is really poor. But Ezra Klein's book Abundance and Derek Thompson's book is really interesting because I'm very optimistic about the role that AI. And this is the area.
That's the great part.
Like in terms of undermining truth and democracy and the welfare of our kids, bad. But in terms of efficiency, design, robotics, these types of things, and making sure we do things quickly, I think that there's enormous benefit to be had in that. I'm very optimistic, as I think Abundance is. The big, beautiful planet, and if we get going with, because it's an interesting time because we're getting this huge uplift in technology at the same time as in Western democracies, especially, we're seeing a decline in population, really.
Yeah.
And those two things have never happened before in history.
Yeah.
And in that mix, we see automation, robotics, and the possibility of real efficiency in government spending. That's like, government spending's good, but I see it all the time. The waste that goes on is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Billions and trillions of dollars wasted.
Yeah.
So I have some sympathy with the sentiments of Doge. Great, let's be efficient with taxpayers' money, but let's not throw out Medicare or Medicaid or whatever.
And that's what they did with USA. They kind of came in and there was a lot in the Trump campaign that I was like, ooh, if you could just do 10% of that sentiment, I think that would be good for the world. But it's Trump and he can't. So he did everything to the nth degree. Like the efficiency part, I was like, yeah, cool, we do need to be more efficient. But they came in and Elon Musk paused USAID and everything crumbled and people have died.
They've just cut all the subsidies for EVs.
Yeah.
And I think the credits for the tax credits for renewables and but I think Elon's getting a bit of a tax break. But yes, they've had a spectacular spat. and falling out. What was your take on the federal election? It as a Liberal Party member, you know, Christmas time, Dutton had his tail up. Where did it go so wrong? Was it that he really fell out with women? Like, because if you look at the real issue for the Liberal Party, where they've lost their seats, it's in the inner city to basically liberal women.
Yeah.
They're like from 100 meters away, they look like liberal women with liberal values, a lot like you. And yet, like, where did they, how did it go so wrong?
So I think when Trump got in November, conservative parties around the world got really cocky and they were like, here we go. It's the vibe shift we've all been waiting for. We're back, boys. Yeah. They rode that for a while, and then there was a week in April, I think, it must have been last week of March, when the cyclone hit in Queensland. We lost the election in a week. And what happened was Trump got up and did that press conference with the Ukrainian Prime Minister, and basically, in that moment, the air went out of the room at every conservative party around the country. Canada, who had a massive, their conservative party was going, gangbusters, plummeted. Ours plummeted. Everyone was like, oh no, the vibe shift is too scary. And then they went back to better the devil you know.
You think that the Zelensky, berating Zelensky and really,
I think that
and looking like too close to Putin, everyone went,
everyone was like, oh, like what I was saying before, like I do think that most people did want a 10% vibe shift. They were like, woke has gone too far. They wanted a bit of it. And then they were like, oh no, we've bitten off more than we can chew. Because that same week, the cyclone hit in Queensland and that delayed the election by a month.
Yep.
The Liberal Party didn't have enough policies to sustain a long enough campaign, which is, our lack of policies was a huge issue. And that same week we did the work from home announcement, where it was announced that, we would be forcing public servants back into the office now.
And sacking half of Canberra.
And sacking them, yeah. And that, Dutton had done, what really was the issue was that everyone pinned the Liberal Party's women's issue on Scott Morrison. They said Scott Morrison is the women's issue. If we get rid of him, we don't have it anymore. He left. Dutton came in. I would actually, hand on heart, say that Dutton was far more neutral. I think at the start of when he became opposition leader, everyone was like, no, we're going to hate him. And he had done a good enough job of softening himself, but we were running on neutral. We were not, which I think is a huge detriment, we were not rolling out policies appealing to women. And that's because a lot of conservative people kind of try and say, all policies are for women. I don't think that's right. I think there are policies that appeal to men. I think there are policies that appeal to women. There are policies that appeal to the age, to parents. That's different demographics, and you've got to go for that. But prior to that work from home announcement, Dutton had been neutral with women. And in that instance, it was this insight into the Liberal Party don't get it. They do not know what women's lives are like. And we spoke about population shrinkage before. There's this phenomenon called the sandwich generation, where largely women, they're having newborn babies and in the trenches of toddlers at the same time that their parents are dying or getting old, because we're having babies later. So women's lives are hard. They are spread very thin. And, I really shouldn't say women. I should say parents, because dads are so, hands-on as well at the moment with parenting, which is a brilliant development. And so we've just got these people. We've also built ourselves up to be completely reliant on each household being a dual income household. That's largely to do with housing and how expensive it is.
And the addendums that are expected in life, that you've got to sort of stay connected with your phones, with technology, you've got to be way more mobile than you used to have to be.
Yep. More friends.
More friends. That's exactly right.
And so I think it is hard at the moment. People have a lot on their plate, and we had been neutral, and, we could have switched that to positive if we just showed we get that. we see you. We know that your life's getting harder, and here's this, niche policy that signals, yep, you're seen. And instead, we rolled out a policy that said we still don't get it.
Mm.
And so, yeah, that week in the campaign, which was the week that Albanese delayed it by a month, that was we didn't come back from there.
Yeah, I felt that too. I thought, hold on, God has intervened here. There's a cyclone, and the air certainly went out of the tyres of the coalition campaign there. I also think the nuclear thing too was it was a pretty blokey sort of like, we'll build it, she'll be right. It's a big tech, and I think there was a lot of people going, well, it was a bit cloth-eared. There were a lot of people going, we've put solar on our roofs. We want to do something green.
Yeah.
We're pro. We're pro economy and pro industry, but we definitely we're a bit concerned about nuclear power station. 50 like in the water catchment.
Yeah, and there was definitely a lot of like, hey, leave it to us.
Yeah.
You guys won't understand the details, but we've got it. And is one of the things that I am more moderate on is climate. I'm very big on climate action. I do think that it's really hard to figure out the best way forward for that. I don't think it's as easy as, people want to make it out to be, and it's not black and white, and people try to make it that. And that's a frustration of mine. But with nuclear, and I try not to comment too much on climate because I read a lot of news. I would say that I'm fairly well informed, but I can get really swayed on climate. Like someone can give me a really convincing argument for solar, and I'm like, hell yeah, like solar's the way forward. And then someone makes a really compelling argument for nuclear, and I'm like, oh, it's nuclear. So, and that's, I think, for myself, I can always recognize when I'm easily swayed on an issue, and that to me signals that it is probably an issue that I am not the right person to be providing a hot take on it. The only thing I will say is that I have found it interesting that a lot of Democrats in the US are pro-nuclear now, and a lot of countries, are pro-nuclear. And if there was a way that we could do it, certainly I'm not scared of it. Like, no, I don't think that should be the reason.
I'm an environmentalist. I'm like, in actual fact, a lot of the leaders of the environment movement back in the day, and people who are worried about climate, are pro-nuclear.
Yeah, and we didn't make that case. We didn't, because nuclear became very left versus right in the election, and we should have been talking about that. That there are environmentalists that are so pro.
Bill Gates, he's like, he's like massive, but he's building them to power his like data servers and AI. But I think Australia could have gone nuclear. Yeah, we could go nuclear if we had a time machine and we went back to the 1950s. And had in the CSI, we'd done it. We'd started then. Yep. If we'd started then, we had the tech. But it's a big, slow industry, and my view is that the climate wars are in Australia are essentially disappearing. It didn't, apart from nuclear, which was sort of dodged. It didn't really appear in the campaign. Not the Greens hardly even campaigned on it, apart from saying no gas, because we're so far down the road to renewables. And it's
40% or something.
Yeah, 40%. But we're like in New South Wales, we'll be at 80% pretty much by 2030. So, look, it's I think it's an issue that's fading, and I think it's going to be replaced by how we, what sort of economy we have, and whether or not it's serving people. What's your view on the 4-day working week? Like basically, we have a dividend with productivity, with AI. We give ourselves, I call it 1 day for restoration, recreation, and the 3rd day procreation.
Oh, good for you. A whole day for procreation.
For all the things that, the procreation bit probably doesn't
spending
take a whole day.
Spending time with your family.
Yeah, spending time. But doing all the things you need to do to have a family, because if you think about a family, that's Saturday, that's Sunday. The Saturdays are full up with, people, like, it's not like everyone's just goes, oh, it's Friday night and we're both not working over the weekend or whatever. What's your view on the 4-day working week? A lot of European countries are going that way.
I just saw Dubai introduced it last week.
Yeah.
For their public servants. So I have written an opinion piece about this.
Have you?
Yeah, I have. I would prefer shorter work days than a 4-day week.
Oh.
I would prefer to make every day more manageable as opposed to still having 4 days that are completely chaotic and having an extra day. But either way, there needs to be something done. Like we can't just, going back to that sandwich generation and the population shrinkage, like we can't just let people not enjoy their lives and to be in this rat race. And because of inequality, it is getting so much more intense and we're constantly on and yeah, something has to give. And I think that if we had a day, because a lot of people talk about extending school days for kids to cover the workday for parents, which is very pragmatic. But personally, I probably think that it's a lot to ask a kid to spend that time away from their parents just to keep saying like, well, keep the kids in school longer. I don't really feel comfortable with that. I would think it would be better to get the adults' work to change. And so I think that we should have like a 9:30 till 2:30 work day, still 5 days a week. But it's like if we're getting AI, if we're getting all of this media, if everything's going to become easier, then why doesn't it feel like that? Why don't we feel the benefit of that?
Because we're still operating basically on the 888 model, which was the Labor movement brought in like the
that was Ford. Was that Ford or who did that? Someone did that.
I think it was I could be wrong here. I'm not an industrial relations expert, but I'm pretty sure it was the English stonemasons who brought that in the UK, like 8 hours rest, 8 hours, recreation, 8 hours work, the 888 model. Yeah. We're pretty much operating still under that. It's 100. It's 150. Yeah. It's heading towards 200 years old, and yet we work differently. We don't walk down the the lane to the mill or whatever it is anymore. It's a much more complex. Our lives have got a lot more in it, and we have to be much more responsive to that. Yeah,
and I think the Productivity Commission have looked at various things, and it not to make sweeping statements, but often when you give people flexibility, it doesn't actually result in this huge backwards step that people would assume it does. Sometimes it actually helps. And so I do think that it's really, even with politics, I just like the small target politics that we have been in a cycle, I think globally in for like the past 20 years has been really frustrating, and we haven't moved far enough on a lot of different areas. And we just need to be a bit creative and bold. And we need to be like, no, like, I'm not the sort of person who will be like, oh, God, that's too big. That'll never happen. I'm like, but why? Like, we should be pushing for those things. Society is capable of change, and we need to do those sorts of things. And really, it's dire. If we can't get making families to be a more appealing thing, the entire country kind of collapses. Like it's really.
I think population is a symptom of a failure of the social contract, and that it's going to be, in actual fact, who was it? The Grattan Institute put out a paper about 2 months ago saying that population is going to replace climate. We're essentially going to the population may well. As a social policy, but population may well be fixing climate. Like because the turn off in population growth, like urban India has a sub-replacement fertility level. Urban India. Right. Thailand has a declining population. Yeah. Indonesia has a population fertility level at 2.1. Yeah. So they've essentially stopped growing.
Yeah, and I think there's just so many factors for that.
Oh, yeah. And in actual fact, if you look at there's not only population decline, there's urbanisation. Like Mexico is 80% urban. Yeah. And it used to, 50 years ago, it was 70% rural. So everyone's moved to the cities. And so I think that ecology, life never sleeps. And I think that ecology, Russia, massive country, declining population, what happens to eastern Russia when there's no people there? Yeah. Trees grow, plants come back. Romania is basically an incredible national park now with the eagles, the wolves, the bears all coming back.
Because there's no people.
Because there's no people. And
that is cool and simultaneously depressing.
It is. It's also, it's a bit The Last of Us, a bit apocalyptic, but also, if you're a polar bear, it might be good news.
Yeah.
But to solve some of these problems, we've got to have clever people in politics talking about them. You're doing that, and you want to do that by bringing more women into the Liberal Party. So you've set up Hilmer's Network, which is it's very popular with some parts of the party, but it's getting a lot of it. It's controversial, but you're really pushing hard. You're really pushing for reform of the Liberal Party. Why is it so important to have quotas for women in the party? Well, I looked at the numbers, and it's not great for it's like 20%, 6 in the lower house for the Liberals in the House of Reps. Why is it so important, and how can you do that, and how does it fit with Liberal values?
So look, basically, I set Hilmer's Network up after Scott Morrison lost the election because I was like, we have this massive women's issue, and I didn't think that it would go out the window with Scott Morrison. So I had a lot of people who I knew had Liberal values who would quietly be Liberal, but they just wanted nothing to do with the brand, which is why I created Hilmer's Network as opposed to calling it Liberal something. We basically hosted events across the country. We've got reps in each state, and we do kind of curated events that talk about interesting topics. It's kind of almost like a podcast. Like we get a panel and we speak about spicy stuff. We've done stuff on, work-life balance, but we've also done geopolitics. Like we do interesting discussions, and it's fun. And it's, we're trying to re-engage community because one of the things that we have issue with across the country is young people not volunteering. And that extends to young people not signing up to political parties. And
I heard this might not be true, but I think John McGowan told me, so it's definitely not true. I think he told me that one of the big costs for the Liberal parties was wreaths for members who had passed away.
I don't know. I cannot confirm or deny.
I just thought that's a pretty bad bio indicator.
I think that he might be pulling your leg on that one, but it certainly sounds like a good line for him.
I know.
But yeah, we do, and that's Labor Party as well. They've got young. We're in this weird thing where young people are more engaged than ever in politics because of social media. But then they're also disengaged more than any other generation. They don't participate in it. And they protest. And I don't like protesting, not for the usual reasons, but I'm like, be part of something more sustained. Like be part of a political party and you can create that change. I think that there's a lot of people who want to, go protest in the street for 2 hours and they want change like that. That's not how democracy works. That's not how the Westminster system works. There is avenues for you and we should be using them. So basically, with Hilmer's, I kind of was trying to reintroduce a lot of people to the Liberal Party in a softer way, but also with the idea of recruiting more members at a grassroots level. And if we could find a few new people to run along the way as well to get into Parliament. Now, the reason is to... I know the critiques that people have against me and against Hilmer's, and one that comes up most frequently when we talk about quotas is that it's not the people, it's the policies. If we just had the right policies in place, we would, attract more people to vote for our party. You don't create the right policies if you don't have the right people creating them. And that's the part that they don't seem to, I try very hard, but it doesn't really seem to land with them. And I'm not sure if that's if they just don't agree with that or if I'm not articulating it the right way, but you need people with a very intimate understanding of different demographics of society to be able to cater for them. And we just haven't done that with women.
They call it lived experience, don't they?
Yeah.
It's great to have a women's policy written by a lot of women or, your policies are represented and formulated by the people that have most experience with them. Doesn't sound like such a controversial idea. No,
and it's also it's not necessarily the biggest budget items. It's not necessarily the spending. I think it's just something that's very almost niche sometimes that goes, ooh, that's interesting. That shows me that you're listening to this demographic, that you hear us, that you get us. So, yeah, that's probably one of the main reasons why I do think it's so important to have a party room that reflects broader society, is because they're advocating for policies for the different demographics that they come from.
But there's a tension in the Liberal Party because
Yeah.
one of the key values there is competition, meritocracy. You know, it's a bit of social Darwinism there.
I have
and
like every time someone says merit at the moment, I like trigger a little bit. I just twitch.
yeah, a meritocracy, but you've got established power bases. It's not like you're coming with a blank slate and it's a race and go. You're coming into an institution where there's sort of some entrenched.
Yeah, it's systemic.
Yeah, systemic.
Yeah, it's very systemic. And
power imbalances there.
52% of the population is women. So if our, I'm actually not quite sure exactly because there's still one seat that's kind of potentially going either way. But, if we've only got 25% women in our party room, like, do you actually just think that men have more merit than women? Like, do you think that men are more capable? What I think it more is the average Australian is a 37-year-old female. The average Liberal Party member is a male in his 70s. Now,
is that right?
yeah.
Whoa.
Now, the problem you have is, and when I speak about this, I'm not saying that like all the men in the Liberal Party are nasty misogynists. That's not it. It's just confirmation bias. And that's really natural. I go to the same pre-selection and we'll watch two candidates and I will walk out and I'll say to the older gentleman next to me, I'll say, God, wasn't Jessica incredible? And he'll say, no, Jeremy was amazing. And it's because I relate more to Jessica and he relates more to Jeremy. And I am obviously simplifying it because a lot of people can see beyond that. But there is confirmation bias. That's not dirty. That's just like, okay, cool. How do we overlook that? How do we be objective? And a lot of people, I don't think, believe in that.
And in politics, you got to know your audience. There's a lot of mirroring, and you say, "Hey, these people, I know what these guys want."
Yeah.
And if you're a guy, well, and you've got an audience of guys that just popped out of the RSL, then
you could get ChatGPT to write a Liberal Party pre-selection. You could get a Labor. You could get a Greens. Like some of these pre-selections in all of these parties, you know what to say to appease your membership. Like that is the long and short of it. And if we're only doing that, that's actually not really in the best interest for democracy because now, membership in political parties is like 0.00 something % of the Australian population. That's the amount of people that are part of political parties. It is so small. And if we're only having parties that appease membership, our democracy is not operating.
Because you're running a petition at the moment, aren't you? And I've seen it's been in the news. It's been
a long day.
It might get longer, especially after we rush this podcast out. But that's open to anyone to sign up onto. What's your view of like open pre-selections? Like that you basically have a primary. Everyone can have a vote on who your candidate is and you let the community decide, not just members.
Yeah, so I'm very open to community pre-selections. I think that they're important. What I think is an issue is like the Teals have like community pre-selection. It annoys me because they say like, oh, we've got, community pre-selection. Essentially, the Liberal Party, Labor Party, like everyone does community ones. Like our Liberal members in, Turramurra, they're still part of their community. They're just also Liberal members. So that's a frustrating terminology. And what would happen in a Teal pre-select, chosen by the community is you're still actually attracting people from the fringe because who else can be bothered to go to a pre-selection for Climate 200? It's only the people who are actually motivated. So you're not getting the centre, even so. So my wacky idea here is that we get, and this is wacky, and people would be like, that's stupid. But it's the only way I can think about combating people from the fringes driving the political discourse in Australia. We all do jury duty. So why not get the AEC to do like a citizens' assembly where you have to talk about some political policy stuff to get a gauge on where people are at, but you can also participate in political party pre-selections. And if your name gets called, you have to go do it.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's a fun idea.
That is a fun idea.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I'm all like, I just don't.
I don't think it'll happen. I don't think I'll get much traction on it, but it's just, I do think when we talk about open pre-selections like primaries like the US, you do still attract a fringe. You are still attracting people who are really motivated. Who else is going to give up their Saturday to go vote in a pre-selection? It's not going to be the centre. And so that's what I'm really curious about is how can we attract that?
It's not such a massive leap, because if you say to people in the States, oh, we have compulsory voting. We compel people to vote. You get a fine if you don't. We say democracy is important.
Yep.
You've got to turn up.
Yes.
Jury duty's important.
It is.
You have to turn up. And why not make them then step to, well, if you accept that political parties are fundamental to democracy, which they're not, by the way. They're not. They're just, I don't know where they emerge from, but I think we'd be much better off with, thousands of independents or micro parties, but I would say that. Why not compel? But why not compel people to get involved in at least understanding how they're governed?
And Ireland has citizens' assembly, so it's not like unheard of. I just think there's something in that to explore, and it goes back to the point of I don't think anyone should be entitled to a good democracy just because they happen to be born in Australia. Like this. If you want a good democracy, you want a country that works well, will you take part in it? And voting once every couple of years, I don't think is, certainly not too much to ask. I think everyone could do an extra day a year, and it wouldn't even be a day. It'd be like a couple of hours, like 3 hours, and your name gets called. Do
Zoom.
whatever, totally. Like it could be done remotely, and just
you could do it anonymously. I often
anonymously, as long as your name was checked off.
Yeah,
so they knew that
you
were
can't
doing
stack it, so you can't have just bots from
Russia.
Yeah, Russia or wherever. Stacking it. I pushed for basically all the Greens on all their pre-selections to be online.
Yeah.
And they hated that. They didn't. The powers that be didn't like that. I would have thought that everyone should be able to vote online, remotely, participate remotely, get online, but they didn't like that. They wanted everyone in the same room so they could bully everyone into, being a Marxist. But look, that is a fascinating sentiment, Charlotte. Do you think you'll be successful? I think time is on your side. You're a young, energetic woman. You've just had a baby, but you're passionate and you're attracting a lot of attention. Do you think you're going to be successful?
Eventually, yeah, I do, because I'm not running, and that's the really important part of it. I don't need to suck up to any of them,
not yet.
And I love being part of the Liberal Party. I really mean that. Like when I go to branch meetings or when I go to various things, there aren't many things in life where you really get to meet randoms and you get to know them intimately now. Like it used to be the church, and I'm not personally religious, but I think that, there's a little bit of, that part that goes into the population shrinkage in sense of community. It's like, you've got one common thing and you're all going for the same party and you disagree on loads and you agree on enough that, it binds you together. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's an unusual experience in life now.
It is unusual. You see how people are meeting each other now. It used to be your family, friends, work, church, your sporting club, this sort of thing. Now it's just
What's
online,
the third place?
And it's just nothing.
Yep. And even today with quotas and that thing being leaked to the paper, those people that I'm in that group chat with, a lot of them do my head in, but I still really admire that they are there. They're doing the work for their party. They have a belief. And, for a couple of days before it turned a bit argy-bargy on there, it was genuinely constructive and it was fun. And it's really an exchange of ideas of someone saying, we were talking about different styles of quota methods, maybe you do a sunset clause, maybe you do one cycle on quotas, the next cycle off. And it's fun. That part is the good part of politics.
I've always thought it strange that some, politicians, disunity is death. Okay, sure, at certain points. But when you've just been towed up in an election, being open about being open and discussing your your failings, what you stand for, all of the things. That's actually what people want.
Yeah.
I think that they want, look, you're mature enough to say, look, we got something wrong. We're having a discussion about it. How can we do things better? And by the way, there's some people here with some ideas.
Yes.
You know, that's what people vote. That's what they want out of politicians is sometimes is ideas. I mean, we've got a lot of, as you say, small target politicians, but still, ultimately, people are going to vote for people who've got, they've ventilated, socialised ideas, and they've seen, they've been responsive into the will of the people.
And you get this really small window after an election loss where you can get the reform. And I'm going hard now. And I've got a 12-week-old baby. The timing of this hasn't been ideal for me. It's been a real juggle. But that window will close pretty soon. They will start talking about the state election for New South Wales, and they will say, everyone shut up. We're going to ground. We are focusing on winning this campaign, as they should. That is strategy.
Let's get our nominations in.
Yeah. Importantly. But now is my window, and now is other women's window to really push for change. And, we have to have a bit of disunity to get there, and we have to have these conversations. But I'm not going to just shut up and be quiet because it makes people uncomfortable to be criticising it, because I'm so sick of talking about the Liberal Party having a women's issue. And I wish that I was more vocal the last time, but I wasn't, because a lot of people said, no, we're fixing it now. We get it. Like, the writing's on the wall. Like, we're going to do it. And they didn't. And so I don't trust them. I don't think a lot of Liberal women trust them. I don't think a lot of Australian women trust them. And so, to the point of the petition.
Well, if you look at the results, it's just the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
Like
we're doing the same thing over again.
Exactly, and didn't win any seats back from the Teals.
Yeah,
and those are seats that should be won by the Liberal Party. Well, they're blue ribbon seats.
And to the petition being open to the public, we've tried really hard internally to get motions up through branches that get buried, that don't make their way to state council. Like, we've pushed for stuff. And it's not working. So where do we have to go? And
what was the guy with the eyebrows? Stockdale?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. Like
the sufficiently assertive women.
Yeah, sufficiently assertive.
Yeah. I pride myself on being sufficiently assertive.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of
and if
women
the
do.
guy you're criticising,
yeah,
I just went, this has got some legs.
Yeah. And so I think it's just, and I don't think it's bad for the public, as you were saying before, to see us doing the work, to see us saying like, right, we're thrashing it out. We're trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Sometimes in not as much colour as they have seen over the past few weeks from us. But I think at least the public knows that, like, right, they're having a red hot crack of, like, people are putting, things on the table.
So that's really interesting, Charlotte. One of the other stories you picked up on in your time out in Tamworth working with Prime 7 was the story of Dan Haslam, who had the terminal cancer and was being treated with medicinal cannabis, the illicit cannabis, that issue, which led to, like, a society, a nationwide change to cannabis laws. Tell us about covering that story in Tamworth. That must have been really difficult, but super interesting.
Yeah, and it was just, it was really inspiring, because you do see the power of one individual or one family. And I spoke to Lucy Haslam a lot, Dan's mum, when I was in Tamworth. They also had the Bell Tower Cafe in town. And it was just such an important story for them, and such an important thing for them to be advocating for, because if you have a family member or someone you love dearly who's as sick as Dan was, and something makes them feel better and makes their day easier and makes their life worth living, then I think that's absolutely worth considering. And that was probably my first kind of introduction to really medicinal cannabis and, what it was capable of doing for families like the Haslams.
Wow, that's really powerful, because it was those local stories that really led to attention. So telling that story locally then led to statewide, national attention. So it really shows the power of storytelling and those local, regional stories. Because, from little things, big things come. I wouldn't be here without that story being out in the national narrative.
Yeah, and I think seeing their families struggle closely, as I did as a journalist. We did stories on them kind of almost weekly. So we spent a lot of time at their house and getting to know them. And I hope I'm not like overstating it, but it was, it's really hard. It's really easy, I guess, to criticize, medicinal cannabis or criticize these things when you don't see it up close and you don't experience it. And when you see someone as sick as Dan was and how it improved his life, it's, becomes a really different argument then. It becomes less so a philosophical one and more so a much more kind of compassionate argument.
Yeah, and who is someone to get in the way of, some like something that's easing someone's suffering and their pain, and so what's your view as a thinker and thought leader in the Liberal Party on legalising cannabis? You're into freedom, a little bit of liberty there. We've seen the United States, so even conservative parts of the United States legalising cannabis. Germany has. What's your view on drug decriminalisation and cannabis legalisation?
Definitely supportive of decriminalising it, and very supportive of medicinal cannabis, particularly in those sorts of situations. I know closely in my life who have been sick, and the medicinal cannabis path is actually quite hard still to navigate. And I think when your life is hard, those sorts of things should be a lot easier than they currently are. I think, in terms of legalizing it entirely, I think probably with the right checks and balances. I don't think it needs to be on in every shop and those sorts of things. But yeah, I'm fairly open-minded to it.
Speaking of putting things on the table, do you have political aspirations? You can, like drop it here. Come on.
No.
Really? No. Not at this time?
No, I've got really big political aspirations to do what I'm doing. I really like the community aspect. That's the part I'm good at.
You had a baby like hours ago.
Yeah.
And we better wrap it up because you've got to go.
I am breastfeeding. No, I do not have political aspirations at this point. Maybe in 5 years, if I'm super frustrated with the lack of big target policy and the lack of movement on inequality, I think that would be my driving force. That might get me in, but no, for now, zero.
Well, fantastic, Charlotte. I really appreciate you taking the time, an incredibly busy part of your life. You're in the media, you're a brand new mum, and you're a thought leader in the Liberal Party with some really interesting and compelling ideas. So you are certainly being assertive, and we really appreciate you for what you're doing in the Liberal Party, the public discourse. I think it's really important, and taking the time to come on Into the Weeds. Really appreciate it.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte.